On today's show,
I honestly think it is millions of small acts of grace. And remember, grace isn't kindness. Grace is giving people an act of decency. I would call it an act of love, even if they're not deserving. You nurtured some of the best activists that I could meet. When I came to your community as a law student, I met LGBTQ actors, homeless actors, immigrant activists, this collection of people that were determined to create transformative change. And I said, I can do this too. And I could do this with a set of mentors around me, chief amongst them you. I don't think I've ever said this out loud, but I think that was the most terrified I've ever been in my life.
Even approaching a burning car.
Yeah.
Hello and welcome to Beyond the Box, the social justice podcast that goes beyond the headlines and typical stories. We like to ask challenging and incisive questions that help us get to a deeper, more nuanced understanding of important issues. I'm your host, Doug Lasdon, founder and director of the Urban Justice Center. I am truly delighted today to have on the show my friend, the Senator from New Jersey, Cory Booker. I know Cory because I recruited him when he was in law school, and he worked with me after graduating. I also got to know Cory better because he lived in my spare bedroom during his last summer of law school. Welcome, Cory.
Thank you. This is exciting for me.
Good for you. It's certainly exciting for me as well. You know, we were talking a couple weeks ago when I talked to you about being on the show, and I was saying how I talked to many students and graduates about their career choices in the social justice world. And because I was there when you were in your 20s making some of these choices, I thought it might be illuminating to discuss some of your struggles and decisions. First joining the UJC out of law school and formulating your project in Newark, and then deciding to run for elective office. I also want to get to some of the differences in being an advocate on the outside when you were at the UJC, and then on the inside as a senator. But right before, when you got on the mic, you started to tell this fascinating story about what just happened to you with an accident, I think on the New Jersey Turnpike. There were some nice lessons there. Do you mind? Let's just talk about that for a minute, and then we can go into your career.
I thank you, because I'm still processing it. It's literally just happened a few hours ago where we're driving down the Turnpike. I drive it from Newark to DC quite often. And as we're driving down in front of us, the great guy driving the car, thank God he was good at sort of avoiding it. But two cars collided once, slammed into the divider, collided again. And we're the lead car right behind the accident. And so we pull over, me and this former detective jump out of the car. He runs to one car. I run to the, really not a car, but a truck. The guy is just out of it. He's barely conscious. And I knew from one of my other friends who was a first responder, like, stabilize the neck. You don't know if there's spinal injuries. But getting in his cabin of the truck, I start smelling smoke. And I'm like, sir, I'm sorry. Are you okay? Can you move? I think we should get you out of this truck. He couldn't get out the driver's side, so we were able to help him sort of climb out, pull out from the passenger side. I walk him over to my car, put him in the back passenger seat.
You're Superman.
I'm definitely not that. Eventually, the car did engulf in flames. I've got pictures of it. But between the time I put him in that car and the time the flames have gotten under control by the fire department, I watched the beauty of humanity, because people just started coming out. The first one on the other side of the highway was a guy who jumps out. He's got a yarmulke on. He turns out to be a Orthodox Jew from Lakewood. And he starts saying, hey, can I help? And at this point, I'm just like, look, I'm just trying to focus on this crisis. And then he goes, I'm an EMT. And I'm like, sir, we could use your help. I bring him down so he can now tend to the guy in the car. I go up to see how the other two drivers are that my detective is, and more people show up, like a road crew show up, and they start rendering support. And just slowly, all of these incredible human beings, many of them volunteers, volunteer firefighters, EMT, police officers, state troopers. It was a small community of people, incredibly diverse. I said Orthodox Jew. There was a Turkish immigrant, black, white, Republican, Democrat, but everybody in that moment was just there to help. Even the car that was struck, the two men that were in the other car, one of the guys was first trying to put out the fire. All he had was an extinguisher. The guy whose car is all now busted up reaches in the back and says, I have an extinguisher too, and offers it to the guy to help put out the fire. I was just in awe. in that moment of crisis to see the beauty of humanity crossing these invisible lines that divide us, affirming the true ties that really bind us together as a community.
I think the question that occurs to me is that can we get that sort of attitude without the crisis?
Yes.
And, I get the feeling if America was attacked, a serious attack, we would all come together. And so how do we do that without the crisis? Because it's in us. You've shown us.
It is. But I honestly think it is millions of small acts of grace that we have to begin. And remember, grace isn't kindness. Grace is giving people an act of decency. I would call it an act of love, even if they're not deserving.
What is deserving?
Yeah, who is deserving, right? And I just think that that is the power that heals. And I've seen it in my own life. I was getting on a plane in the last midterm elections. I laugh because mostly people are nice and I get unbelievably gracious things said to me. But occasionally enough people say things to me that I think I should get Mother's Day cards during Mother's Day because I get called, you mother, so often. And I sit on a plane next to this mom and daughter, 60 and 80. And they're like, who are you? Because everybody's paying attention to me. They're from Alabama. They have no idea who I am. And they make this assumption that often for big black guys we get, which is, are you a professional athlete? And I smile and I go, no, ma'am, I'm not.
People don't realize you could have been 5 catches against Notre Dame. 5 catches, Notre Dame.
So
go ahead. Sorry.
Thank you for that. My ego really is grateful. That's an act of grace. And I go, no, ma'am. And she goes, well, what do you do? And I go, I'm a senator. I'm a United States senator, ma'am. And immediately, like most Americans, she wants to know what tribe I'm in.
Oh, yeah.
And she goes, are you a Democrat or Republican? And I go, ma'am, I'm a Democrat. And she crosses her arms, looks really mean, swivels her hips away from me and says, I should have brought my Trump hat. Now, that's a song we all know.
So how do we get past that? What is...
Well, this is what I did.
Yeah.
I look at her and I go, oh my gosh, Donald Trump, he signed 2 of the biggest bills I've ever written into law. One was the Criminal Justice Reform Bill, and the other one was called Opportunity Zones, that since has gotten billions of dollars of investment in America's lowest income rural and urban spaces. And she was shocked that I was complimenting Donald Trump and confused, I think.
Yeah.
But it was a little bit of an opening that gave us the ability to see each other's humanity.
Hard to go from there to the bigger picture, though. We seem to be so stuck, and there seems to be such powerful interests with so much to gain from stoking the fires of divisiveness.
Yeah, it's not even just political opportunism. Because how do you keep people's eyes on these screens?
Oh, yeah. Capitalism. No, yeah, all of it.
And it's not just even social media. One of my favorite stories from a friend of mine, Van Jones, is he was on this show Crossfire with Newt Gingrich. And I love what Brene Brown says. It's hard to hate up close, so pull people in. And he finds out he likes this guy, and they have a lot in common, despite their political differences. And then they realize they have a lot of policy in common. And they ask the producers to do the last segment of Crossfire and call it Ceasefire.
Oh, great.
But then producers stop them after a few shows and say, you can't do it anymore. Ratings are going down. And so the algorithms, the TV, it's really things that often outrage us or make us feel morally superior and condemn people for their idiocy and create caricatures. And so how do you fight against that? When you have economic forces, political opportunistic forces.
How do you fight against that other than once I heard a story from you about picking up the seashells one at a time?
Yeah.
Do you have anything that can pick up seashells more than one at a time?
Well, I want to remind you just one thing real quick.
Yeah.
Is that also our enemies know this, or our adversaries.
Yes, of course.
Russia, China, people in warehouses that go on our social media pretending like they're Americans and do everything they can to stoke the fires of our divisions. So all of these perverse motivations are going on. And I think the first thing to do is to recognize how powerful you are. I think it was Alice Walker said the most common way people give up their power is not realizing they have it in the first place. And you know this. There was a white guy on a couch in 1965 watching TV, and the Edmund Pettus Bridge came on and Bloody Sunday. And he was so moved by it. He said, I'm going to go to Alabama then realized he couldn't because he couldn't afford to. He had just started his law firm. He didn't let his inability to do everything undermine his determination to do something. You know this story. He decides he can only do an hour of pro bono work and calls around to see who needs his help. He finds this woman, Lee Porter, young woman in the 1960s, head of the New Jersey Fair Housing Council. And the reason why I've interviewed her now, I found her easily because she's 94 and still head of the New Jersey Fair Housing Council.
Good for her.
And this guy helps her set up these sting operation that when black families are coming to look for homes in the wealthiest neighborhoods.
I know where this is going.
Right, because New Jersey's one of the more segregated states in America, that all this informal steering of black families or preventing black families, redlining black families, and they get really good at setting up this sting operation where a black couple goes to look at a home, and when they're prevented, a white couple comes and poses as them. And then amazingly, 5 years later, he tells the story about getting a case file. And again, he's only doing a little bit of pro bono work, but he helps to engineer all of this. And the black family that he gets a case file from turned away from houses, but they set up the sting operation. White family finds out the house they were told sold is still for sale. They put a bid on the house. Bid is accepted. On the day of the closing, the white couple doesn't show up for the closing. The black man from the family does. Lawyer walk in, confront the real estate agent, who gets up, punches the lawyer in the face, sings a Doberman pinscher on the black guy. But long story short, thanks to all this rigmarole, the family moves into this town, the first black family ever. And then 43 years later, the baby, who was just a baby, just a few months old from that black family, becomes America's fourth black person ever elected to the United States Senate. Me.
Yes.
And so you talk about little things. That guy did a little thing. He didn't let the enormity of the world, of the nation's problems, overwhelm his desire to just do the best I can with what I have where I am. And it's everything that I'm doing now in my life. I'm not sure if I would be doing if it wasn't for the opportunities afforded to me, that by the time I'm 18 years old, I'm an all-American football player, president of my class, honor society, and on my way because I was given this fertile ground to grow up in by a guy who was willing to do what he could to make a difference. He planted a seed and it's blossoming now. So I'm sorry. There's an old Jewish saying that if you hear, or maybe it's Eastern saying, if you hear the world is going to end, plant a tree and then go find out if it's true.
Are you saying that what we should all do is we should all commit to planting seeds and be part of the forest ourselves? And at some point, maybe the forest spreads. I have a feeling that if some of our leaders exhibited this behavior, that it might help as well.
Again, but we can't control what someone else does.
No.
We can only control what we do every single day. And cynicism is suffocating, stultifying, and people who surrender to that cynicism forget that American history is a perpetual testimony to the achievement of impossible things by ordinary people who did extraordinary things despite the odds, despite the challenges.
Now this message. We're here with Michael Barish of Barish and McGarry, lawyers for the 9/11 community. So 21 years after 9/11, incredibly, most of the 500,000 people who were exposed to the deadly toxins still don't know they're entitled to free lifetime health care and compensation. Why do you think they haven't enrolled?
Two reasons. First, many non-responders tell me that they didn't realize that no matter their family history, nearly every cancer has been linked to the exposure to the World Trade Center toxins. Second, many of them feel guilty and they don't want to take from others who have died. Thankfully, you won't be taking money from anyone since the Victim Fund and the health program have been fully funded by Congress. Susan, millions of dollars remain unclaimed. It's so important that you register. 68 cancers have been linked to the toxins. Remember, 9/11 didn't end on 9/11.
Contact Barish and McGarry today at 911awards.com. That's 911awards with an S.com.
But there are also extraordinary leaders.
Yes.
Who get up there and say, as you have, the engine of society should be love, not hate. And somehow, sometimes leaders can get up there and the message gets heard and all of a sudden things change. And I think now is that time because I think everybody is sick of hating.
Yes.
And so we might be susceptible to the right leader. And, if this was not planned, but I'm sitting here looking at you on the computer and I can't help thinking that maybe one day that'll be you. I would love it if that was you.
I had a Republican pollster in my office, very well-known Republican pollster, who said to me basically what you said with data. He said that maybe in 2018, 19, 20, people wanted folks that were going to punch somebody in the face. But he goes, the polling is now showing people are sick and tired of the hate and the smear and the division and the fear. And they want leaders that can bring people together, remind us of our better virtues. And so maybe it is, maybe the pendulum's swinging. But at the end of the day, neither you or I should care.
Well, you should care. You might have a chance to do that. I'll do my small bit every day if I can.
You changed my life, Doug Lasdon. That's what I'm saying. You're another person that changed the trajectory of my life. And I got to tell that story.
Tell whatever story you want. This is great.
So I'm coming out of law school. By my second year or my first year, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I will never forget my mom challenging me and saying to me, what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? Go out and do that. And I remember looking at all of these people that most inspired me in this world. Marion Wright Edelman, Brian Stevenson, Jeffrey Canada.
Some giants. Those are some giants.
Jeffrey
Brian
Canada,
for sure.
Back in the mid-'90s was not the giant he is today. And getting a lot of courage and confidence, thinking to myself, like Jeffrey Canada did, I'm going to go to Newark and start a nonprofit. But I still needed someone to support me in that endeavor. And that was you. I came to you with the dream that I was going to go to Newark, New Jersey. I was going to take the Urban Justice Center national, cross the state border, go west, young man, and be a part of your incredible, what you did for many people, which is just, you nurtured some of the best activists that I could meet. When I came to your community as a law student, I met LGBTQ actors, homeless actors, immigrant activists, this collection of people that were determined to create transformative change. And I said, I can do this too. And I could do this with a set of mentors around me, chief amongst them you. And I applied for a Skadden Fellowship with your help. And next thing you know, I got this great salary of $30,000 a year. I got my enormous law school.
Enough to get you into public housing.
Enough for me to move into very humble housing in a low-income neighborhood that I still live in today. And to start building this nonprofit. Those early days, we took on this one slumlord that eventually would be convicted in the federal court, but everything is going great. But the tenant leaders came to me, started saying to me that the city government is corrupt and they're not representing our interests and we want you to run for city council. It was both an idea that enticed me and terrified me to give up all the dream that I had been shaping over the previous year or so. The prestigious fellowship I had, which was a 2-year fellowship, the safe community of people that were doing exactly what I was dreaming of doing. There were a lot of the people running different parts of the Urban Justice Center, to leap into this unknown world and run for city council.
Where you could fail.
Spectacularly. And most likely would have, because the joke back then was the only way a city council person left office in Newark was death or conviction. And it wasn't conviction of your principles. And I was running against a guy 40 years older than me. If I won, I would have been the youngest person ever elected in the city's history. There was just no reason we could win. And I walk in to talk to you about it. And instead of trying to throw cold water on me and say, wait a minute, Cory, you're a Yale Law graduate. You've got a Skadden Fellowship. You've got this great plan to start something that the guy that you're inspired by won the MacArthur Genius Grant. Instead of just telling me to stay in the groove that I'm in, you enthusiastically pushed me out of my comfort zone and said, you should do this.
That was over a few conversations. I remember we had some long, difficult conversations.
Yes.
More difficult for you. You were troubled by the whole thing. I thought you should do it because in addition to being brilliant, you have a big vision that includes compassion and love, a sense of decency. You inspire like nobody I've ever known. And I thought it was selfish of us to keep you. I thought that we should give you to a much larger population and you should have a bigger stage.
Well, I have to tell you that I don't think I've ever said this out loud, but I think that was the most terrified I've ever been in my life. I was
even approaching a burning car.
Yeah. I remember during that period getting hives. I've never had hives before. I remember just like back aches and migraines. I was just so struggling over making this decision, and I was terrified because I was leaping without a net.
Yeah.
And I got backlash from people to give up this fellowship that was so competitive, and I had taken a space up, and you were in the corner saying, jump.
I was looking at the bigger audience. I was looking at the bigger impact. The question here for me was not whether you had an important fellowship, which you did, but could you be making a bigger impact? To bring it back again, to be spreading the love and spreading the decency and to a larger impact. And that, to me, was the most important consideration.
Well, I still remember a partner at Skadden who, when I told him my final decision, one of the most uncomfortable meetings I've ever had, because he berated me. Berated me for giving up the fellowship.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
And then years later, he came back and said he was wrong.
Oh, good. I'm glad. I'm a big believer in terms of careers, in pivoting, in terms of what we do. We are headed down one way, and if we see an opportunity that is consistent with our goals and our values, we shouldn't be afraid to pivot.
There's certain amongst us that have a level of privilege where we are obliged to take risks and to go to where we're afraid.
Sure.
And try impossible things. And when I say privilege, I'm not talking about wealth. I have this incredible team. One of my team members just told me that she started with $100,000 worth of debt, interest payments out of control, $170,000 worth of debt. Thankfully, what we've done on college loan forgiveness, she just had the whole $170,000 wiped out.
Oh, great. Great.
Yeah, but we live in a world now where public interest people can get their loans paid for. So it's not even the golden handcuffs anymore. If you're privileged enough to go to college and get a degree and have an inkling of doing unconventional something, go. And I remember a guy said to me, a well-known New Jersey lawyer said to me when I was struggling with decision, he goes, what's the worst thing that can happen? He goes, you fall flat on your face and fail. And then you get up and you're still this law graduate, this, that. And he goes, you got to be kidding me. And if you are in that kind of position where even the worst thing that can happen is something you can still get up from and find a job, even if it's not the job of your dreams, it's worth you chasing that job or that challenge. And look, for me, it paid off dividends I never imagined. And look at this. This was in the 97, 98. That map right there is the actual map that hang in my campaign headquarters that I moved into when you said to me, go do that. That is the actual map. And I keep it, that big blown up map, in this office to never let me forget why I did what I'm doing. I may have now risen to United States Senator, but I still go home to that same neighborhood that you visited in the past. I still think every single day, am I proving worthy of those folks who first, by 12 votes, got me into politics?
You can be inspired every day by the picture of Gandhi that I see in your office right above your head. Hopefully we'll get people a picture. But I just wanted to comment on the privilege. I do think in today's world where we can all have, not all, some of us can have an apartment that's big enough. We can get food that's good enough. We can have entertainment that's good enough and even exciting on all those things. But to be able to work and do something that's meaningful to us and productive and interesting and sometimes even fun, that is the greatest privilege. And I think more and more people are seeing that and making decisions based on those values.
100%. And what excites me about millennials and Gen Z is I'm seeing more people who are driven by virtue, by jobs that fulfill their sense of moral calling. My generation that grew up in the 80s, the me generation, the Gordon Gekko, greed is good.
Oh, yeah.
I'm happy to see more people really question the purpose of life. What is a fulfilling life? And I promise.
I hope so.
I hope so too. Again, you and I are very hopeful people. Your story, which I hope you've told on this podcast, of how you began your career. Way unconventional.
I haven't, but the quick story is I was in a burned out building in East Harlem bringing cases, but we'll talk about that.
How could you have your own podcast and not tell the most inspiring story that helps?
We will talk about that another time.
Okay, but for guys like me, you were speaking from an authentic space to me about following the unconventional path, doing the things that people might think you're crazy.
Let me throw in, if anybody's thinking of careers, you don't have to start with running for office. Get in somewhere, explore the landscape, almost like you did, and you weren't looking for the opportunity, but you will then see opportunities. And you don't have to just go and do something good, get a job anywhere, doing good, consistent with your values and your goals, and then you will see opportunities, as Cory says, and don't be afraid. I did the same thing. I went off on my own. I got a small grant. I started bringing cases from this burned out building in Harlem. And I said, I'll do it for a year and then see what happens. And, we won some cases and got some money, et cetera.
And you innovated. You were an innovator in the space. You found ways to partner with big law firms and bring world-changing cases. I mean, you're right. You basically were making it up as you went along because there was no script. There was no script for doing what you were doing.
Which was the most fun of all.
Yeah. I have to say, I've come to realize life is about purpose and not position.
Yeah.
I still remember I was sitting with some college kids and they're going around the table. I'm asking them, what do you want to do? What's your dream? And one person says, I want to be president of the United States or a United States senator. And I'm like, okay. The next person's like, I don't know what I want to do, but I love kids. And I think that there's a lot of injustice facing children. And I want to do something about that. And I'm like, I don't mean to pick on you, sir, but I think life is about purpose, not position. If you're just looking for a job and a position, that means your moral core will go anywhere just to hold on to that job or position. But if you get up every single day knowing my purpose is to help this kind of people, my purpose is the map that I have hanging up there, is the work that I'm doing proving worthy of the community that first had faith in me, that's different. And so jobs come and go. I am not wedded to this position that I'm in, because if you kick me, if the voters of New Jersey didn't return me to this spot, my raison d'etre is not over, because I'm not here for a position. I'm here for a deeper purpose. I would still be living in the community. I would still be fighting a lot of the issues. I would find another way to go about it and get back to being entrepreneurial and trying to find a way to make a difference.
Too many of your colleagues from the outside don't live that life. Or maybe I'm wrong. You tell me.
I think that we all should have lines, right? Like I watched one of my colleagues after the Access Hollywood tape, like he pulled away his endorsement of Donald Trump, then got massive backlash and re-endorsed. And I'm like, okay, have I made compromises? First of all, I'm not going to stand in judgment, because I still remember one of my races turned out to be a disastrous decision, but I was a renter. I was living in projects, as you know. I didn't own anything in Newark, and people said, if you're going to be mayor, you need to buy something. And I basically bought this money pit, thinking this, like I would have time to like rehab and do this house. Worst financial decision of my life. I lost more money on this, all because I was trying to be the politician and not stick to my values. Most of my city are renters. I am who I am.
Sure.
And so, but I did make a compromise for the job. So the question is not, do you make compromises? Where are you drawing your line? And so I would hope that most of my colleagues, and again, this has been a period where I have questioned that.
Yeah, that's wise.
Would draw a line,
Right. Hi, everyone. We're trying to get the word out about the podcast. So if you like it, please make sure to follow us on your favorite podcast app, and please rate us 5 stars on the Apple Podcast. And finally, please pass this episode on to your friends. Thank you for your support.
Now this message. We're here with Michael Barish of Barish & McGarry, lawyers for the 9/11 community. So 21 years after 9/11, incredibly, most of the 500,000 people who were exposed to the deadly toxins still don't know they're entitled to free lifetime health care and compensation.
Yes, it's frustrating that most non-responders still haven't taken advantage of the 2 programs that were created for them. Downtown office workers, residents, students, and teachers were breathing the same toxic dust. Not surprisingly, they're getting the same cancers and they're dying of the same illnesses.
More people have now died of 9/11 illnesses than the nearly 3,000 people who died on that day.
Sadly, that's true. So I urge everyone to protect yourselves. Register for the health program and the Victim Fund now, even if you're currently healthy. Protect yourselves. Protect your families.
Contact Barish and McGarry today at 911awards.com. That's 911awards with an S.com.
Behind the scenes or when you walk the floor, have you been able to make friends with people who people on the outside might think, oh my God?
We often make these simplistic assumptions about people. Like, let me give you an example. One of the people I have done the most big, good work with is a guy named Lindsey Graham, who a lot of people love to hate on my side of the aisle. And I tell people time and time again that you get rid of Lindsey Graham and who knows who you're going to get from South Carolina.
Of course.
But let me tell you what Lindsey Graham has done. Lindsey Graham, a few years ago, the president made a request for humanitarian aid that was too low. And Lindsey Graham happens to be head of appropriations for the committee that does international food aid. And so me and Chris Coons, I feel like I
know Chris.
Yeah, I'm Sancho Panza. He's Don Quixote. He's Batman. I'm Robin. Whatever the metaphor you want to use.
Yeah.
Push Lindsey Graham. Don't really have to push him, but he's like, yeah, let's do something about it. We got billions of dollars. There are literally lives saved. Let me give you my favorite Lindsey Graham story. It is during the Kavanaugh hearings, and he's chairman, and it's awful. And we're being polarized like crazy over this issue in the nation. Meanwhile, we're putting the short strokes on the criminal justice reform bill. I am trying to squeeze into that bill every last thing, and I have this desire. The bill's closed. It's done. But I calling Jared Kushner and telling him that I want to put a virtual ban on juvenile solitary confinement at the federal level.
Great. That's so important, by the way.
There's not that many juveniles in the federal system, so it doesn't affect that money. But symbolically to me, I believe what other countries say about juvenile solitary confinement, that it's torture. You know, coming out of New York,
totally,
it's torture.
It is torture. I'm going to do a podcast episode on solitary confinement.
Right. So I'm now arguing with Jared, and I'm bluffing. I'm like, I'll tear this whole bill down. I've got to get this last thing in. It's like we're on vacation, trying to shove the last thing in and hope the suitcase can close. And he's not letting me. And we're arguing. And finally he goes, well, let me see what Lindsey Graham thinks. And I'm like, this is not going to help me. This is like a really tough moment with Lindsey and Democrats in general. And he gets Lindsey on the phone, and, White House operator gets Lindsey on the phone, and he starts in on Lindsey, Jared does. And Lindsey's like, what are you talking about? He goes, we can't get this bill done without Cory Booker. Give him what he wants.
I was hoping you were going to say, we can't put those kids in solitary confinement. They have high levels of suicide and psychotic reaction. But good, help you any way he can. But
yeah, but my point is, he's a deal maker. He's a guy I consider a friend.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah, people find that stunning. How could you have such different views on? You pick the issue that's passionate for me, abortion rights, all of these things where we passionately disagree, but yet I still have found lines that we can connect on and do good work that we both are proud of.
Perhaps there'll be a moment when you and he and perhaps some others can get together and let people know that behind the scenes, we don't hate each other. We are trying to figure out how to work together.
But it's worse than that. We are at a point now where we so demonize each other. We close off any opportunities to share humanity and to connect. And I still remember Chris Christie, the governor of New Jersey, when I was mayor. He's the governor of my state. I'm the mayor of the largest city. People don't understand. I got to work with this guy and make efforts and become friends with him. He tells me the story that he is running in the 2016 election primaries. He's catching up to Trump. He's in second place in New Hampshire. And the super PAC, I can't remember if it was Rubio or Jeb Bush's super PAC, run a commercial on him. And all the commercial is it shows him hugging Barack Obama.
I know.
And it says, Chris Christie, too close to Barack Obama. He fell 10, 15 points and just for hugging another human being. And the crazy thing, the hug was after Hurricane Sandy.
Yes, he was saving lives.
Yes.
I remember that.
We have so demonized each other that just human contact now, you can't even touch somebody of a different tribe. You can't even sit down with them. You can't even affirm that you have. It is such an extreme state. There's been polling where you ask somebody, here's a policy issue that's Republican, immediately forget even like reading the policy.
No, I know.
And then they switch it, use the same policy, and say it's a Democratic policy, and all Republicans against us. The tribalism is killing our curiosity and our openness to learning and our humility before other people in my faith. I believe they're created in the image of God.
Look what happened with Ukraine and Russia. The Republicans, for decades, at least decades, we can't let this giant country, Russia, take over these small countries. Donald Trump says he likes Russia, and all of a sudden, all those people just change their minds. Not all the Republicans.
But Ronald Reagan is spinning over in his grave right now about what's happening with the country on the brink.
To say nothing of the Republican Party.
Yes. No, but I'm not going to disagree with you there. Again, I love what you said. It's no broad brushes. There are a lot of Republicans who are fighting to get Ukraine the support that they need. Chance the Rapper says, don't believe in kings, believe in the kingdom. Unfortunately, there are people that it's Donald Trump's way. No matter what he says, it's Donald Trump.
Yeah, it's weird.
As opposed to the ideas, the policies, the things that he, like, I'm sorry, you could search the world 2 times over. You shouldn't be able to find 2 people who agree on everything. And yet there are some people that believe that nothing Donald Trump can do is wrong. And that's wrong in itself.
It's strange. We need to think for ourselves.
Yeah, I'm going to be fighting really hard for Biden, but I have disagreements with him.
That's healthy. That's a healthy relationship.
Yes. I remember on the debate stage with him, my mom won't forgive me for this. I just was going after him for his marijuana policy. And I said, I don't know if you were high or not when you wrote this policy, I said. And my mom's like, you don't accuse the vice president of the United States of being under the influence of marijuana on national TV. And I'm like, I think you're right, Mom. I didn't show grace in that moment.
Anyway, thank you very much. Cory, I said I was going to take you for half an hour. We've gone over. I appreciate your time. It's so delightful to talk to you.
I just want your listeners to know you are a hero to me. Oh. You changed my life.
So kind.
Honestly, at the point that I needed someone in my ear, and you're right, it was over a few conversations, you affected my destiny in such a profound way. Not to mention one of the funnest summers of my life, living in your spare bedroom. I still remember watching the 96 convention. Yeah.
What I remember is eating a lot of broccoli and beans.
Yes.
And we had the best time.
I got in such fierce shape that summer because we were eating a very Spartan diet and opening cans. You and I were the 2 terrible bachelors living together, opening cans of beans and putting them in pots.
And watching the conventions.
Yeah.
Let me just tell people, if people ask me, what's he really like? And I say, this is what he's really like. He's fun, he's smart, he's inspiring. You have a good time with Cory Booker.
Can I ask you, do you still play the piano? Like your determination to play.
I do play the piano. I am playing a Chopin etude. I'm sorry, a Chopin nocturne, excuse me.
No, but I loved watching you struggle, honestly.
It's a struggle. I'm not very good. Interesting, I like the work. I like practicing. And then when you get somewhere, you feel really good about it.
Yeah, well, maybe that's a metaphor for life. Struggle, practice, and before you know it, you've gotten someplace really good.
Let's leave it at that. Thank you so much, Cory.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to see you and talk to you.
For me as well.
Go do good.
Thank you, my brother.